It's recording now. Hi.
How much are you paying me for this?
Obviously not enough. But we should make these into bloopers. Okay. Okay. You prepared?
I gotta get my heart watch there going there.
Okay. Bring her all back. Hello everyone. My name is Niki Breau Kavanagh. I'm the Executive Director with Friends of Beaubears Island. And if you don't know, the infamous, the famous,
Is my hair okay?
the legendary,
Is my hair okay?
it's pretty.
You're lying.
Our Friends of Beaubears Island Senior Historical Correspondent, John English, in the flesh. So,
And lately a lot of flesh.
I don't know if you've been watching online or noticing our post, but John has had some health issues as of late. So we're glad he's on the upright and he's walking. So he's on the upright and he's walking. So that's a good start. But the reason why it came about, I was wanting to have a conversation with John, and John's like, you know, we should do this. And we're like, yeah, so we're doing it. I know that sounded kind of like, you know, yeah, like we should do this. That's kind of what it sounded like. Yeah, like we should do this.
I don't want to lose annoying little brats.
So it's one of those things I've known you since I started here in June of 2021.
Seems like forever.
I know, eh? We're like BFF. OMG.
FF something.
So I've known you since that time. Just a little bit. Every Saturday, you and the lady and the pups would come over, take a ride over to the island and walk the island.
Yeah.
And so this is how I got to know you. And then slowly but surely, you were providing information, showing screenshots of, you know, animal leftovers.
The Pine Martin thing.
Yeah. So you've been providing information all along, and this is when I'm like, okay, this is a really cool guy. He really enjoys the island. So as I'm learning of more and more about the island and, you know, the people associated, I'm learning about the people who love the island as well, long before I've come into town, if you will. So this is where we're at, and now I get to put you in the hot seat. So John, tell us about you.
What are you, my therapist? Jeez.
And the thing is, if people don't know, this is literally how we go on.
I'm not paying you to be my therapist.
Come on.
No, not doing it.
Yeah,
So, okay, we're going to start chronologically because that's got kind of an order to it. So, I was born in July of 1964. There was 4 kids ahead of me, and we were the surprise. We were born a twin. I have a twin, and I looked at a dry diary that my mother had put together. This had to be 6 months at least after she got out of the hospital, like 6 months from the birth, because she wasn't in the hospital for 6 months there. So it had to be 6 months after I was born. Anyway, so it started, John and James were born on this date, and what a surprise. Not what a pleasant surprise, not what a beautiful surprise, it was a surprise. So the reason for that is, on the birthing table, no one in the room, including the doctor, knew there was twins. Nobody. Back then, we didn't have this ultrasound equipment in my machine in '64.
Oh my.
Nope. You would have had an X-ray, but not an ultrasound.
Really?
No.
Interesting. Okay.
Or I was hiding behind James, and he was like giving me the elbow. One of those things. I don't know.
Either or.
I don't know. In '64, I didn't know the technology that well. So anyway, yes, there was 2, and I don't know, 3 minutes apart or 4 minutes apart, and 2 pounds and 2.5 pounds, 2.5 or 3, something like that. Very low weight, and my mother lost her pulse twice, and we managed to survive. We had a great Scottish doctor actually, and the doctor said, you don't name those kids. Why not? They're not going to make it. Don't make the kid. Don't name the kids. because it'll be easier to let them go if there's no names.
Wow.
So we didn't have a name for a week. We were just baby A, baby B, and in appearance, I'm totally the opposite of my twin, and we always thought the nurses just played a prank and got some babies mixed up, and we're not really related. That's what we thought growing up.
And technically, it has happened in the past, right? So it's always for a stretch.
So my mother was pretty bad shape, and she stayed in the hospital for 6 months. So she had sisters, and I came down to the Dolan house here in Nelson and stayed with my mother's sister there and her family for 6 months. And apparently, they fell in love with me. They cried when I left 6 months later. So let's get that straight right now. So
how could they not, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. Thank you very much. And my twin brother went to a sister in Newcastle, and I have a picture of both of us at the house down in Nelson where I stayed for 6 months, sitting there with baby's clothes on and chewing on a baby corn or something, whatever it is. But anyway, so the first day of life was pretty rough for us there, and as I understand it, my parents, there was 4 ahead of us, 2 older brothers, 2 older sisters. My dad at the time was a forest ranger and didn't make a lot of money there, not a lot of money going on there. So it come to be that they bought the house in South Nelson Road where I grew up, and it's right across from the Tickle. And the Tickle, of course, is the opening between Wilson's Point and the island.
Really? So
every day I was alive, I looked out the back windows, I could see the island every day.
Cool.
So, that happened, and when they went over to the house, as I understand it, there was no indoor privy. I don't think there was any running water. So I think my mother said, I'm not going on that house without running water. Of course, 2 young babies, and then 4 kids ahead of us.
Yeah.
You can't blame her.
Mm-hmm.
So they fixed up the house there, and we went in there, and of course at that time you could see Fraser's pulp mill, and
Wow.
in 67, I think roughly 67, 65, Acadia Garnwood mill came into play. So we were kind of squeezed in there with a pulp mill on each side, and depending on which way the wind would go, you would know, you didn't have to know which way the wind was going, because the wind was coming and here to the northeast, you'd hear the groundwood mill with the barker going around with logs in it. You could hear that. Or if it was coming from the northwest, you could smell the Fraser's pulp mill.
I was thinking that.
And it was a very middle class neighborhood that we grew up in, and I didn't think we had any money, and I sure as heck didn't see it when I grew up. And but I wore my share of hand-me-downs and patched clothes and all of that stuff, and share of canned spaghetti for supper. And to this day, I still can't eat canned spaghetti. I suppose I have to get therapy for that one, but anyway.
You can pay me another day for that. Okay, go on.
And of course, we had friends close by, 2 close friends. One is he's still in touch with me, and the other I've lost touch with him. But anyway, we'd go outside, and we were kind of rambunctious there. I would say rambunctious, out of control, is what relatives called us, frankly. So my mother had a hard time keeping an eye on us, because you couldn't let us out in the yard, because zoom, we'd go across the road into the woods, or zoom, we'd go down to the water. Couldn't keep us in the yard. So my dad said, okay, we're going to build a playpen. I don't know, 4 by 4 feet, 4 feet high maybe. And he said, there, put them in the playpen outside, and they'll be outside, and they'll stay there. So yeah, that worked until we started looking at how we could open this playpen door, and we couldn't, because we couldn't reach it. But one of us got on the shoulders of the other, flew the latch, away we went. They were some friggin' mad. So, and it was a very, at that time in 67, 67 was the time that Nelson got incorporated to a village. before that we were just, that whole road was just there. There was no incorporation to it whatsoever. So in '67, the village got incorporated, and my dad got involved with the parish council here for St. Patrick's, and for the recreation council for the village, and council this, council that, whatever. So he was, probably half the week he was going into meetings, and frankly, we loved it because we could get away with everything.
Well, Dad was gone.
So by the time we came along, my parents had just gone through 4 kids before us, and we could get away with a lot of stuff, and we did. And we had a good time. We had a wonderful time. Spent a lot of time outside. And I remember the flood of 1970 when this road right here, this front street, Nelson, was underwater there, below the T in the road. We have pictures of icebergs there, and Sean McCarthy's father had nice pictures there for that as well. Anyway, and so ships would come up, of course, go through the Morrissey Bridge, and ice would be 2 feet thick in January, no problem. And some years you'd have cars. Cars would go on the Strawberry Marsh, onto the river, and spin around and go up and down the river.
Wow.
Of course, the cops would try and chase some of them, and that was a joke.
Yeah.
Half of them in that car were probably not straight as an arrow, and just had a good time.
Times were different then.
Oh, the only laws were laws that you could get away with when you broke them. That's what it was like. Like in Nelson, there was no municipal police. We had the RSNP, and they drove up the road once a month on a Sunday afternoon, probably because they was bored.
Where were they stationed then?
They had a station in Newcastle.
So took a while for them to get up this way.
Up there was, you might as well be in Bertie Bogue for all they cared. They didn't care anything. There was no crime up there. We never had any crime. So the only rules were what could you get away with when you broke them. That's true. And the 70s were wide open. There was, they were coming out of the liberation movement in the 60s and the drug culture in the 60s in the U.S. And then it hit Nelson at probably around 73, 74. And I remember staying down at my aunt's there in Nelson right here. They had a big elm tree, maple tree rather, over the sidewalk, and we'd climb up in that tree at Friday nights, and there's, people coming by that were, 18, 20 that were probably under the influence, and we start making little noises, and they'd be looking up trying to find where the noise was coming from. We didn't care. We just got, we just bugged people just for the heck of it. Even on this property, we called this the bark pile, because at the time there was nothing here. It was an old sawmill.
Okay.
Brian's property, I'm thinking. Anyway, there was bark that they used to put at the edge of the sawmill, and then they put large ties, sometimes cedar poles to make side of a wharf. And it was a bark pile, and that's what it was. It was just bark that accumulated there from sawmill, and the older crowd would come up and sneak across the road here, and they sit there and spark a few things and laugh a few times, and some of them would go over the island and have a bonfire over there, and sometimes they'd have a really good party over there because you'd see them and hear them. And of course we were young, and so my father would just come down some nights and just kind of cruise back and forth, and we could see what was going on. So he was a forest ranger, and then about 75 he went with tourism, and he ran the provincial parks that we had. The enclosure was a wonderful park, beautiful park.
Really? I did not know that.
Yeah, and there would be hundreds and hundreds of people there every weekend, and it had a lovely swimming area, beach there, and it was well attended and well looked after.
So he had different events during the nights there, I'm guessing, or the days, or.
Well, some Saturday nights we'd get in the car and he'd kind of drive around in the park itself where people had tents and campers just to make sure it wasn't out of control, basically.
Nice.
And he had this big police spotlight that plugged into the cigarette lighter, and you could see a long ways with that. So he kind of did that, and he was busy with committees, and we could just pretty well do what we wanted. During the summer, we grew up, we biked, we fished, we swam, we were in the woods as much as we can, in the water as much as we can, outdoors all the time, except probably for sleep and food.
Well, I have to ask. So the story goes, when J. Lennon O'Brien was there, and he would be watching people over in the island. You heard this one. And when we give our tours, we tell this to people. That he'd be over there, up top with his binoculars, and watching to see if anyone was on the island. And if there was, he would tell his people, get in the boat, and get over there and bring them back. Take them off the island. Were you spotted, or did you know anyone?
No, I was too young for that. I think the park went to, he deeded to the country, the government of Canada, and I'm thinking 74, roughly, 74, 75. So 74, I was only 10 years old, so I wouldn't be one of those delinquents over on the island causing trouble. That would have been my older brothers and sisters. And so we grew up, and we went to Nelson School right across the road. When we turned grade 3, and just above the hill there was a little white school that people could talk about, and my mother would dress him, James, and I in similar clothes, except the colors would be different. We'd have the same sweater, but his would be blue and mine would be brown, and we kind of got sick of that, but we had no choice. So I think in the white school, most of the teachers were nuns, and by golly, if you were acting out, you got some attention, some extra special attention.
Is that what you're going to call
with
it?
A strap about, I don't know, must have been 16 inches long and a quarter of an inch thick of laminized rubber. That sucker hurt. You didn't do whatever you did twice.
I bet not.
No. So, and up around where we grew up, it wasn't money up there at all, and my father was lucky he had a full-time steady job, but there was a number of people that didn't have that, and I suppose compared to them we were well off, but at the time we didn't think so. So we grew up in the 70s, and of course we went to Boy Scouts with the Al Neil troop, and God bless that man, because we'd go over to the enclosure for maybe a week or a week and a half. The whole troop of us, there'd be 50 or 75, maybe 100.
Wow.
A lot of kids in the 70s, and him and a couple of assistants, I suppose, would bring all of us over there, and I think they got these bell tents, and they looked like they were from World War II. They were made of canvas and had a pole in the center that would go up 20 feet, and then it would be this shape of a bell, and there would be pieces of rope on the outside every 2 feet, and attached to them would be a peg, and you put the pegs in, and that would stand up the tent. So being kids the way we were, we'd sneak out at night and just take all the pegs out and just wait for it to crash in somebody's head.
Yeah.
But Al O'Neill, I mean, he put years and years into that scout movement, and every Friday night he went there, and he had a big influence on a lot of people. And when I see him again, I'm gonna thank him. At the time, I didn't appreciate it. You just assume this is the way it is everywhere, and that was not the case. I mean, we even had an outdoor rink that is up there where the current cross-country ski area is.
Oh.
And some of the locals, the Doyles, the Trevors, a lot of them, we had steel shovels, and we'd play hockey, and then we'd scrape the ice, go around and scrape the ice and take the shavings off, and then the fire department, we had our own volunteer fire department, and they'd come up with a tanker and flood it when the weather was good for making new ice.
Nice.
So everything in that community was volunteer. The volunteer fire department, volunteers for scouting movement. Softball was huge. We brought in 1976, I think we brought in the National Junior Championships of Softball of Canada. and
Wow.
and I think we won it, because I remember it was a big deal, and so they got a bunch of the fire trucks that they had, and put the team on the fire trucks and paraded through the village with the sirens and the lights going. And today you wouldn't get away with that, because laws are quite strict, and insurance would be a problem. But back then, insurance, we didn't care about insurance. We didn't care about, nobody sued anybody. That was insane. We'd never even heard about that.
Yeah.
So everybody really looked after everybody in the village, because we knew everybody. You went to the same church, the same school, the same scouts, the same ball, the same hockey. And so we got to know the kids. Of course, obviously, you see them every day, and then you got to know some of the parents as well.
Sorry, but this is where, you know, it takes a community, a village to raise the child.
It was an incredible
Nice.
village,
Nice.
incredible village. And that time you could, we wanted to get out and play ball. There was ball fields just up over the hill across from Birchall's. There's still one there. We'd have to come down. We'd either have to bike. We'd have to bike coming down through the Acadia pulp mill, which was illegal, but we did it because of a shortcut. And so it was just like it was like 10 minutes of just going paddling as fast as you could. Make sure you didn't get run over by a pulp truck or something like that. And that was okay. That was okay. Or we hitchhiked. We stood at the side of the road and just put your thumb out. Everybody knew everybody. Yeah, where you going? Just down the ball field. Okay, we'll let you out here. And they bring us down to the ball field. And you hitchhike home.
Nice.
There was no danger. We'd never heard of anything like that.
Yeah.
And that's what was great about that community was you knew everybody, and everybody looked out for everybody else. There was different levels of income for sure. Birchall's was going usually, but they never made any great money there. The Nelson Sawmill was going usually, but no big money there. There was middle class money at the pulp mill, but in part of the 70s, late 70s, when the energy crisis hit, I remember we had an old car. It was a 4-door Chevrolet something. Like back then they were wide cars, eh? And my brother took it not my twin, but one of the others took it across the Morrissey Bridge, and I think he was coming back from the Black Horse Tavern and scraped all the side of it. So anyway, and I remember my mother saying, if gas goes to $1 a gallon, I'm not buying no more gas. So I don't know what it would be now. $3 a gallon? I don't know.
Ish.
Yeah.
Ish.
Yeah.
On the day.
And we always thought if that car makes it over like 100,000 miles, we're gonna leave it at the dump. So we had the 70s was a good time up at the fire hall, just above where they had the truck stored for the fire department. They'd have dances there. Of course, we were too old for that, too young for that, but my parents would go in and I guess chaperone. We'd walk around and we knew all the older people, and we'd sneak up on one and give him a punch in the knee or something and run away.
How old were you at that time?
Well,
Ish.
64, so 74 you had dances up there, 10, 12, around that age.
A little bugger, weren't you?
We're out of control. It was pretty well. And they used to have a winter carnival here in Nelson, and my God, they were a good time. They used to have, hot dogs, which you can't eat no more, but we'd have a little hot dog contest to eat hot dogs and slam back, eat no problem, eh? Just incredible. Then you go and play hockey, great. And they would have had a pageant, they would have had music, they would have had people coming in of all ages. And that was the great thing about Nelson. You were included whether you were 4 or you were 44 or 74. And of course the ball games down in Nelson were well attended by the locals, and they, someone like came in with a little bottle of whatever, and they'd sit in the stand, and it wasn't blatant. They would just kind of keep in a little paper bag and just take a little drop once in a while. They had a canteen there, and it was a great place to go and play ball. And we had great players there. Some of the Dailies were good, the Conleys were good. geez, it was a great time, and I'm so glad I lived through it. I'm so glad I lived through that, because you know, at the time I thought, okay, this is a life for every kid my age, and it wasn't. It wasn't, because the community was so much behind its own population. That doesn't exist anymore that I know of on the river to the degree that exists back then. So I'm really glad, glad that we lived through that. We went through that, and you know, there's sometimes we had a snowmobile, and sometimes we had a motorboat, and we'd be on the water. We was outside all the time. School was just, you went there because your parents told you should go, you know. And that's the way it was. And you know, even at a young age, I can think when I was about eight years old, I still have it. It's like a poster. You had to make a poster of what you thought you were like, or something like that. Mine was like, I like somebody that knows what needs to be done and does it. And that's the way even 8 years old.
Wow.
That was part of my personality. And I'm still that way. I don't tolerate any BS. Can't do it. Won't do it.
That's why we get along so well.
Yep. So 70s were pretty wide open, and like I say, the only laws you were concerned about is what you couldn't get away with if you broke them. Like even seatbelts were like optional in the 70s. Most parents at home smoke in the living room. The kids were there. I mean, you know, if you went visiting to, not me, but at that age, but if someone went to visit at somebody's house on a Saturday night, they'd have a little snort, you know. It was very common back then to have a drink and not be really concerned about DUI. It wasn't really an issue back then. I don't know of many people that did it to the degree that it would be dangerous, but now for anybody to go into a house and have a couple of beer, they would be thinking right away it might going to be DUI.
Yep.
True. Nobody cared about that back then. And the church was very active. In fact, I remember in the 70s they had a teenage drop-in center at St. Patrick's basement. And they had bowling alleys there. And they also had these pinball machines, you know.
At the church?
Yes, in the basement. That's right. That's right.
What?
And they had this big kitchen in the back, and they had these big, you know, ranges and cupboards and pots. And they would often, when there was First Communion, everybody would go downstairs and have sandwiches and cup of tea, or even for a funeral. After the funeral, go down there and commiserate, I suppose. So even that, the church itself, however they got the money and put in pinball machines, and it was this teenage drop-in center, because the teenagers at the time were kind of ediver at the time when they were on the weekends, you know, so they wanted to give them something to do, maybe to get them off the GD Island. I don't know. I don't know.
Big picture.
Yeah. So anyway, so in 1980, 81, we would have been grade 9, grade 10, you know, that's the time when we started going to the tavern over in Newcastle. So you go to the tavern Wednesday night would be 25 or 50 cent draft. So if you went there for $10, you know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So, and then you had the high school hockey games in Chatham. I don't think we ever attended one straight, ever, never. And jeepers, you would, the Nelson crowd were kind of full of character, and they never backed down for nobody.
So, I have to ask a question here. How old were you when you were going into the tavern?
16.
Were you allowed at that point? Like, was that?
Well, we were big enough that nobody cared. Like I say, rules were just kind of
loosely
interpreted.
Fair enough. And so it was quite okay just to walk in. And
oh yeah, 6 of us would go in and go to the tavern, and obviously it was legal. But like I say, the economic times were very bad in the late 70s, the early 80s, and people just didn't give you a hard time because a lot of the people were financially broke, didn't have any expectation of a future. So anyway, we'd go to a Thursday night game, and of course, we went to school in James and Hill because we were on the south side of the river. Of course, the opposing team was Miramichi Valley, and we didn't get along with them too well. So, you know, they would all, the Miramichi Valley crowd would be saying Miramichi Valley, MVHS. So, you know, after we got a little guts in us and a few snorts, we'd go behind the walk around at the top where the rink is on the Newcastle side, and they'd be chanting MVHS, MVHS. We'd say socks, and we do that, and we do that, and we do that, and we'd glare around at somebody just egging them on to come and have a knuckle, you know, fight with us. And it happens sometimes outside. And what can I say? And then Friday night you go over to the tavern again, and we were lucky.